Hello and welcome to today's video. In this video, I'm going to go over more practice problems. I'm here with my assistant, Bo. Bo, say hello. To go over some more practice problems. In today's video, you need to know for loop, while loop, and file manipulation. The link to those videos are available in the description below. In this video, I'm going to work on 4 different problems. First, calculate the occurrence of vowels in a file. Calculate mean and max, calculate total profit and loss by reading and appending to a file, printing and a structured table using C programming. I'm not going to solve all 4 of them. I will focus on the first one. I'll give you some hints for the other 3. I'll put the timestamp of different videos in the description below so you can easily jump between the questions. What I would do is to show you guys the problems. It would be great if you could pause the video, try to do it yourself, and then look at my solution. The first problem is asking us to write a program, vowel.c, which counts the number of times each of the vowels occur in the file. The vowels are the characters A, E, I, O, and U. The program doesn't distinguish between uppercase and lowercase characters. After counting the numbers of times each vowel occurs, the program prints a sideways histogram of the result to an output file, vowelsout.txt. For example, if an input contains 48 A's, 49 E's, 48 I's, 42 O's, and 18 U's, then what you see on the screen should appear in the output file. The link to the input files that I'm going to use today are going to be available in the description below.
As always, I will divide the question into different steps. The first step is to declare the variables. The second step is to open the input and output file for reading and writing, respectively. The third step is to count the vowels in the file. The fourth step is to print the histogram to the file. And the last step is to close the files we opened in step 2. In the first step, I need 2 file pointers. I would name them input file and output file. The reason I cannot just go ahead and say file star input file, comma output file is the star. I will talk about it in future, but just know that the asterisk is important. And if I do so, only input file variable would be declared with the asterisk. Therefore, I would do it in 2 different lines. The rest are going to be some integers that I'm planning to store the number of vowels my code is going to find. I also need an iterator for my for loop and a character to save every character that I'm reading from the file in it. In step 2, I need to open the input file for reading and the output file for writing. In step 3, I need a loop which starts from the beginning of the file and goes until the end of the file. If you don't know how this loop would read the file character by character, click on the link available on the screen. The link would also be available in the description below. Now I should check to see if each character I read in the file is a vowel or not. I'm going to use if-else structure to check for lowercase and uppercase A, E, I, O, and U. As you see on the screen, I'm using num a++, which means num a equals to num a plus 1. Therefore, we need to initialize num a before the loop. I'm going to go back to the step 1 and initialize all num variables to 0. Let's put a breaking point on the beginning of the while loop. If I step over the line, you would see that the first character is B. And as the return value of the scanf function is not -1, the condition will be true, so we would jump into the body of the while loop. As we start jumping over the line, you see that all the conditions are false, so the value of the num variable would not change. If I step over, we would go to the next loop. This time, we read lowercase u. And as this is not the end of the file, the body of the while loop will be executed. In this case, in the last else if statement, the condition is true. So as you can see, the value of num u will be incremented by 1. The next step is to print the histogram. I would use for loop to print asterisks to the file. If you have not watched my for loop video yet, Be sure to check it out. Link would be on the screen and in the description below. I'll print the histogram on the screen first. I just quickly wanted to mention that the 3 between the % and D shows how many spaces you need for printing the integer. It is normally being used for the alignment of the output on the screen or in the file. If you're not familiar with it, I have a video for it. I will put the link in the description below. I'll put a breaking point on the first printf line. If I compile and run the code with debugging or pressing just F5, the first output is a colon, then 3 space, and printing the integer num_a on the right side of the 3 spaces, which will result in space, then 27, then colon again. After colon, with the benefit of the for loop, the integer will go from 1 to 27. And we'll continue printing the 27 asterisks on the screen. On the next printf statement, I just put a \n in order to go to the next line for printing the next histogram. To move the output to the file, I just need to change the printf function to fprintf and add file pointer arguments to the fprintf function. This time, I'm just going to compile without debugging by pressing Ctrl F5. And as you can see, on the output file, the result is there. Let me copy this code block and use it for all the num variables, and compile and run without debugging to make sure the output is correct, and yes, it is. In the final step, let's close the files, and the job is done.
In the second problem, the question is asking us to write a program, maxmin.c, to find the maximum and minimum of values in the file maxmin_in.txt. Your output should look like what you can see on the screen. Let's jump into Visual Studio and see how we can solve the problem.
Let's go ahead and divide this into different steps. The first step is to declare the variables. The second step is to open the input file. On the third step, read the input file and find the max and min. And the last 2 steps are printing the output on the screen and closing the file. The algorithm I can think of to tackle this problem is to read the first number in the file. Imagine there is only one variable in the file. What would happen here? The float number I just stored in the variable x is both min and max. The next thing I need to do is to increment an integer variable to keep track of the number of variables I read. Note that this variable n has to be initialized when you declare it. Now let's add a loop to read the rest of the float numbers in the input file. Each time I read a variable, I need to perform 2 tasks. First, to check to see if the number I just read is smaller than minimum or greater than maximum. So let's see what happened here. I read the second number in the file, then stored it in the variable x. Now if x is lower than minimum, I should update minimum, as the previous minimum clearly is not the correct minimum. Then if it was not less than minimum, I would check it to see if the number is greater than maximum, and update the maximum if the condition is true. The next task here is to increment n, so we can keep track of the float numbers we are reading from the file.
I hope this hint helped you to find the solution to the problem. However, if you think you need more help, I'm here and waiting for your questions. In the third problem, the question is asking us that the input file, salesin.txt, contains a series of lines with the 3 numbers on each line. Each line corresponds to a certain item which has been bought and then subsequently sold. The first number is the buying price of the item. The second number is the selling price. And the third is an integer which shows the quantity of the item sold. We are interested in keeping track of total profit and total loss for all of the item listed in the file. For example, if a line in the file contains 1.34, 1.87, and 4, then that item yields a profit of $2.12, and this number should be added to the total profit. Similarly, if another item reads 3.22, 2.87, and 6, then that item had a loss of $2.10, and this number should be added to the total loss. The question is asking us to write a program sales.c, which repeatedly reads the buying, selling, and the quantity values from salesin.txt and reports the information to the output file, along with the item profit and total running profit, or the item loss and the total running loss. For example, if salesin.txt contains the following lines you can see on the screen, then the output should contain profit, loss, and total loss, as you can see on the screen. Let's jump to Visual Studio and see how we can solve this problem.
Let's break it into steps. First, the first step is to declare the variables. The second step is to open the input and output files. Step 3 is to read the data from the input file and print the output to the output file. And the fourth step is to close the files. Let's read the file until the end of the file. I'm going to create the file pointer and open both. Then I'm going to read the file until the end of the file. I need to add by, sell, and quant to the list of my variables. Now I want to go to details and tell you how this loop would read the file line by line. Let's get rid of the while loop for a second. What would this line do? Let's put a breaking point here and debug the code. If I step over this fscanf line, the value of the variables by, sell, and quant would change, as expected. But there are two important things about this fscanf functions as well. Two more important things. The first one is that the fscanf function has a return value, and it is 3 in this case, as you can see. It means that I can go ahead and store it in an integer variable. If I restart the debugging and step over the fscanf line, you would see that the variable return of a scanf function is also updated. The second point is that the color of the variable input file, remember the file style variable, the one I like to call it the position of the blinking cursor, is also changed to red or orange. Means that the value of it has changed. Why and how? Why? I would tell you. How? Let's leave it for future. The reason is fscanf will move the cursor to the beginning of the next line. That is why the value has changed. To prove it to you, I'm going to just copy the fscanf function a bunch of times. What happens here, each time the function is being executed, it will read a new line. Don't believe me? Let's restart the debugging. I'm going to move line by line. You see that? We read the 5 lines in the file successfully. Have you guys noticed I added the 6 fscanf function as well? Let's see what would happen if I execute this line. As there is not any line left in the file, as you can see on the right hand side, the function will return -1. That is how we can understand that we have reached the end of the file. Let's bring back the while loop and do it in a loop. This is a loop that reads the file line by line until the return value of the fscanf function is -1, which makes sense. You've seen me putting EOF instead of -1. EOF is short for end of the file, and someone in the stdio.h library has put a compiler constant for us. So he or she just wrote #define EOF -1 in the beginning of the stdio library. I only use EOF to make my code cleaner and easier to read.
I hope this sync works. Let me know if you need any help. Okay, let's jump to the question number 4. A lumber company needs to create a table of the engineering properties of its rectangular cross-section lumber. The dimensions of wood are given as base and height in inches. The table is to include the following information you can see on the screen. The company makes lumber with base size 2, 4, 8, and 10. The company makes lumber with base sizes 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 inches. The height sizes are 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12 inches. We should write a program to produce a table with appropriate heading to show the values and the computed engineering properties. Store the table in the output file lumberout.txt Part of the table is shown on the screen. Let's jump to Visual Studio and see how we can do this.
Let's break it into steps first. Okay, step 1 is to declare the variables. Step 2 is to open the output file for writing. Step 3 is to print the header rows of the table. Step 4 is to print the content of the table using nested for loops. If you don't know how nested for loop work, I have a video for it. Link would appear on the screen and I will put it in the description below as well. And finally, in step 5 is to close the file. The reason I need nested for loops for step 4 is that the number size could be 2x2, 2x4, 4x2, 4x4. In this way, I can cover all the possible rhombus sizes. Let's start with the first for loop. In the first for loop, I will loop over base size. Let's print it to the screen to see how it works. As we expected, the sizes of bases 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 are being printed to the screen. Now let's add a for loop. Inside the for loop, I have to print the height of the numbers as well. As always, let's debug the code and see what is happening. What happens here is, for each base, the second loop would iterate for all heights.
I hope this hint helped you guys. If you need more help, please don't hesitate to send me your questions. I'll try my best to answer you. And thank you for watching today's episode. Have a great day, and as always, see you in the next video.